I was standing on my front porch, watching the sunrise paint the Texas Hill Country gold, when a white sedan kicked up dust along my ranch road, and my gut told me this wasn't going to be a friendly visit. The car stopped in front of my house, and out stepped a woman in her mid-40s with that particular haircut, you know the one, shorter in the back, aggressively highlighted, wearing a blazer that looked like it cost more than my truck payment. She clutched a leather folder against her chest like it was body armor, and marched toward me with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no in her life. "Vincent Yarborough?" she called out, not waiting for me to answer. "I'm Patricia Henderson, president of the Meadowbrook Estates Homeowners Association. We need to talk about your property." I leaned against the porch railing, coffee mug in hand. "Madam, I think you've got the wrong address. I'm not part of any HOA. My family's owned this land since 1891. She stopped at the base of my porch steps, her smile tight and practiced. "That's actually what I'm here to discuss. The Meadowbrook Estates development has grown significantly over the past 5 years, and your property is now essentially surrounded by our community. We're prepared to make you a very generous offer." "Not interested," I said, taking a sip of my coffee. "This ranch has been in my family for 5 generations. It's not for sale." Patricia's smile didn't waver, but something cold flickered in her eyes. "Mr. Yarborough, I don't think you understand. This isn't really a request. The HOA board has voted to pursue eminent domain to acquire your property for community development. We have connections with the county commissioners, and we're prepared to move forward with or without your cooperation." I set my coffee mug down on the railing, carefully, because my hands were starting to shake, not from fear, but from anger. Eminent domain? You do realize that's for public use, right? A private HOA can't just take someone's land because they feel like it. "We have lawyers who disagree," she said, her voice saccharine, "and we have the financial resources to make this happen. You can accept our offer now, $3 million for your 600 acres, or you can fight us and end up with whatever the court decides. Either way, this land will become part of Meadowbrook Estates. We're planning a golf course, an equestrian center, and luxury condominiums." She pulled a document from her folder and held it out to me. "This is our formal offer. You have 72 hours to respond before we file with the county." I didn't take the paper. "Get off my property." Patricia's mask slipped for just a second, revealing the person underneath, someone used to getting exactly what she wanted. "You're making a mistake, Mr. Yarborough. We always win. Always." She dropped the document on my porch steps and walked back to her car. I watched her drive away, the dust settling behind her like a bad omen. I picked up the document and read through it, my blood pressure rising with every sentence. They were claiming that acquiring my ranch constituted public benefit because it would increase property values in the area, create jobs, and improve infrastructure. It was the most absurd legal reasoning I'd ever seen, but the signatures at the bottom were real county commissioners I'd voted for, lawyers with fancy letterheads, even a state representative I vaguely recognized. I pulled out my phone and called my lawyer, Tom Richardson, who'd handled my family's legal matters for 20 years. "Tom, I need you to look at something. The Meadowbrook HOA is trying to use eminent domain to take my ranch." There was a long pause. "They're what?" "You heard me right. They want to build a golf course and condos on my land, and they're claiming it's for public benefit." Tom exhaled slowly. "Vincent, that's not how eminent domain works. It requires legitimate public use roads, schools, utilities, not private development. Who signed off on this?" "That's the problem. I've got signatures from county commissioners and a state rep. They've got political connections." "Email me the document. I'll review it today and get back to you. In the meantime, don't sign anything and don't let them bully you." I spent the rest of the day working the ranch, checking fence lines and moving cattle, but my mind kept circling back to Patricia Henderson and her threats. My ranch wasn't just property, it was history. My great-great-grandfather had built the original homestead with his bare hands. My grandfather had survived the Depression by raising cattle and growing crops. My father had taught me to ride horses in these same fields. Every acre held memories, and I'd be damned if I'd let some HOA with delusions of grandeur take it from me. Tom called back that evening. "Vincent, this is worse than I thought. The legal document is technically legitimate. Someone with serious pull has been working behind the scenes. The county commissioners have already scheduled a hearing for next week to discuss the eminent domain filing. Can they actually do this? In theory, no. But if they've got enough political pressure and a sympathetic judge, they could drag you through years of litigation. Even if you eventually win, the legal costs would be devastating. And they know it. They're banking on you giving up. I sat down at my kitchen table, the weight of the situation settling over me. So what do? You fight, but you need bigger guns. This isn't just about property law anymore. This is about corruption and abuse of power. You need to go higher up the chain. Do you know anyone at the state level? I thought about it for a moment. Actually, I might. You remember Jake Morrison? Your old college roommate? Yeah, he's the governor's chief of staff now. We've kept in touch over the years. It's worth a shot. Call him tonight. Time isn't on our side. I found Jake's personal number in my phone and dialed, half expecting voicemail. Instead, he answered on the third ring. Vince, it's been too long, man. How's the ranch? Actually, Jake, that's why I'm calling. I've got a problem and I need advice. I explained the situation. Patricia Henderson, the HOA, the eminent domain threat, the political signatures. Jake listened without interrupting, but I could hear him typing in the background. This is Patricia Henderson from Meadowbrook Estates? He asked when I finished. That's her. I know that name. She's been making noise in Austin, trying to get legislation passed that would expand HOA powers. The governor shut her down hard last year. She's connected to some developers who've been accused of predatory land acquisition tactics. My heart rate picked up. So this isn't the first time she's pulled something like this? Not even close. Vince, send me everything you have, the documents, the signatures, all of it. I'm going to loop in the Attorney General's office. If county commissioners are signing off on bogus eminent domain claims, that's a serious ethics violation at minimum, possibly criminal. I don't want to cause trouble, Jake. I just want to keep my land. You're not causing trouble, they are. Let me make some calls. In the meantime, do not engage with the HOA. Don't respond to their offers. Don't attend any meetings. Let them think you're consulting with lawyers. I'll call you back tomorrow. I slept poorly that night, decades of family history weighing on my mind. I kept thinking about my father, who'd passed away 3 years ago. He'd loved this ranch more than anything except our family. The idea of it being turned into a golf course would have killed him if he were still alive. The next morning, I was feeding the horses when 3 vehicles pulled up to my property. 2 sheriff's department cars and Patricia Henderson's white sedan. My stomach dropped. I walked toward them, keeping my hands visible and my expression neutral. Patricia got out of her car, flanked by 2 deputies. She looked triumphant. Mr. Yarborough, I have a court order granting the Meadowbrook Estates HOA preliminary access to your property for surveying and environmental assessment. These officers are here to ensure we can conduct our work without interference. One of the deputies, a young guy I didn't recognize, held out a document. Sir, this is legitimate. You need to allow them access. I took the paper and scanned it. It had a judge's signature, Judge Carolyn Mitchell, someone I'd never heard of. This says preliminary access. What does that mean? Patricia stepped forward, her smile victorious. It means we're moving forward with the eminent domain proceedings. The hearing has been expedited to this Friday. The court recognizes the significant public benefit of our development project. Your property will be assessed, and if you continue to resist, the court will determine fair market value and force the sale. Friday? That's 3 days away. We're very efficient, Patricia said. Now, if you'll step aside, our surveying team will be here within the hour. The deputy shifted uncomfortably. Sir, you need to comply with the court order. I pulled out my phone. Give me 5 minutes to call my lawyer. You have 2, Patricia said. I walked back toward my house and dialed Tom. They've got a court order for property access and a hearing scheduled for Friday. What judge signed it? Carolyn Mitchell. Tom swore. She's new, appointed 6 months ago. I don't know much about her, but this timeline is insane. They're trying to ram this through before you can mount a proper defense. I'll file an emergency motion to delay, but I need you to do exactly what they say regarding property access. We can't give them any excuse to claim you're in contempt. Tom, I can't let them. Vincent, listen to me. Let them survey. It doesn't mean they've won. But if you interfere with a court order, you'll end up in jail, and then you definitely lose. I'm going to file motions today, and we're going to fight this. Trust me. I hung up and walked back to Patricia. You can survey, but you stay away from the main house and the barn, and your people don't harass my livestock. Agreed, Patricia said, though her tone suggested she didn't care what I wanted. We'll be professional. This is just business, Mr. Yarborough. I spent the rest of the day watching strangers with clipboards and measuring equipment walk across my property. Each stake they drove into the ground felt like a violation. By evening, they'd left, and Patricia made a point of stopping by my porch. The survey looks excellent. This land will be perfect for our needs. I really hope you'll reconsider our offer before Friday. $3 million is generous for this type of property. This land has been in my family for over 130 years, I said. It's not about money. Everything's about money, Mr. Yarborough. You'll learn that soon enough. After she left, I called Jake again. They've got a hearing scheduled for Friday with a judge I've never heard of. They're moving fast. I know, Jake said. I've been making calls all day. Vince, this goes deeper than I thought. Patricia Henderson is the public face, but there's a development company behind her called Horizon Properties. They've been buying up land throughout Texas Hill Country, and there are allegations of bribery, intimidation, and fraud. The Attorney General's office has been building a case, but they didn't have enough evidence to move forward. Until now. What does that mean for me? It means you might have just given them the smoking gun they needed. The governor wants to talk to you personally. Can you drive to Austin tomorrow? My hands were shaking. The governor wants to talk to me? You're a constituent facing illegal seizure of generational property by corrupt actors. This is exactly the kind of thing Governor Richards ran on stopping. Can you make it by 2 in the afternoon? I'll be there. The next day, I wore my best jeans and a clean button-down shirt and made the drive to Austin. The state capitol building was intimidating, all granite and history, but Jake met me in the lobby and escorted me through security. The governor cleared his schedule for this, Jake said as we walked through marble hallways. You've got his full attention. Governor William Richards was younger than I expected, maybe 50, with sharp eyes and a firm handshake. His office was surprisingly modest: books on Texas history, photographs of constituents, a state flag in the corner. Mr. Yarborough, Jake's brought me up to speed on your situation. I want you to know this isn't just about your ranch. This is about property rights and the rule of law in Texas. What the Meadowbrook HOA is attempting is illegal, immoral, and exactly the kind of abuse I promised to stop. Sir, I appreciate that, but they've got a hearing in 2 days. I don't know what I can do. Governor Richards leaned back in his chair. Let me tell you what's going to happen. First, my office is filing an amicus brief in support of your case. That's a formal legal document stating the state's position that this eminent domain claim is fraudulent. Second, the Attorney General is opening an investigation into Judge Mitchell, the county commissioners who signed off on this, and Horizon Properties. Third, I'm personally calling the presiding administrative judge to request judicial review of Mitchell's order. And fourth, I'm holding a press conference this afternoon to make it very clear that Texas doesn't tolerate corruption. I sat there, stunned. Why are you doing all this for me? Because it's the right thing to do, Governor Richards said simply. My family were ranchers too, 3 generations back. I know what land means in Texas. It's not just property, it's identity. And more importantly, I took an oath to protect the people of this state from exactly this kind of predatory behavior. Patricia Henderson and her associates have been operating in the shadows for too long. You're giving us the opportunity to bring them into the light. Jake handed me a folder. This is everything we've compiled on Horizon Properties and their tactics. They've targeted at least 15 other landowners across the state. Some fought and lost. Some gave up and sold. You're the first one with enough political connections to fight back effectively. What happens at the hearing Friday? I asked. Your lawyer will present your defense, and the state will present ours. With the Attorney General's investigation underway and the governor's public support, I'd be shocked if Judge Mitchell doesn't dismiss the case. And if she doesn't, we appeal immediately. One way or another, you're keeping your ranch. The press conference that afternoon was surreal. I stood next to Governor Richards as he told assembled reporters about the attempted land grab, the corruption allegations, and his administration's commitment to property rights. He didn't mention my name specifically, but he made it clear that his office was intervening. Eminent domain is a necessary tool for legitimate public projects, Governor Richards said, but it is not a weapon for private developers to steal land from families who've owned it for generations. Texas will not tolerate this abuse, and my administration will use every legal tool at our disposal to stop it. The questions from reporters came fast and furious. Was he investigating specific individuals? Yes. Were there criminal charges pending? Possibly. Did this represent a broader crackdown on HOA overreach? Absolutely. I drove back to my ranch that evening, feeling like I'd stepped into an alternate reality. 24 hours ago, I'd been facing the loss of everything. Now, I had the governor of Texas in my corner. But Patricia Henderson wasn't done. Thursday morning, she showed up at my ranch again, this time without the friendly pretense. "You think you're clever, running to the governor," she snapped, standing in my driveway. "This doesn't change anything. We have a legitimate court order, and tomorrow's hearing will proceed. Your political connections might get you some good press, but they won't change the law." "Actually, Patricia, the law is exactly what's going to protect me," I said. "Eminent domain requires public use. A private golf course and condos don't qualify. You know it, I know it, and now the Attorney General knows it." Her face flushed red. "We've invested millions in Meadowbrook Estates. We've created jobs and increased property values. Your ranch is an eyesore and an inefficient use of valuable land. The community deserves better." "The community existed just fine before your HOA showed up, and it'll exist just fine after you're gone." "We're not going anywhere," Patricia said. "And neither are you. We'll tie you up in legal battles for years if we have to. We'll sue you for interfering with our development plans. We'll make your life miserable until you give up." "Get off my property," I said quietly, "and don't come back without a court order." She left in a cloud of dust and rage, and I immediately called Tom to document the encounter. Friday morning arrived cold and gray. Tom picked me up at 7, and we drove to the county courthouse together. He'd prepared a thick binder of documents, property records, historical land deeds, legal precedents, and the state's amicus brief. "We've got a strong case," Tom said, "but Judge Mitchell's an unknown quantity. If she's legitimately corrupt, she might rule against us anyway, just to delay and complicate things. Be prepared for this to be the first round, not the final one." The courtroom was packed. I recognized some of my neighbors who'd come to show support. Patricia Henderson sat at the opposing counsel's table with 2 expensive-looking lawyers in designer suits. She wore a navy dress and pearls, playing the role of respectable community leader. Judge Mitchell entered, and we all stood. She was in her early 40s, blonde hair pulled back severely, expression neutral. "Please be seated. We're here regarding the petition for eminent domain filed by Meadowbrook Estates HOA against the property of Vincent Yarborough. Counsel, please present your arguments." Patricia's lead attorney, a man named Douglas Pemberton, stood and launched into a polished presentation about community development, economic benefit, and legal precedent. He claimed my ranch was underutilized land that could serve the greater good through proper development. He cited cases where courts had allowed eminent domain for economic development purposes. He made it sound reasonable and inevitable. Then it was Tom's turn. He stood slowly, deliberately, and began to dismantle their argument piece by piece. "Your Honor, this case represents a fundamental misunderstanding, or perhaps a willful misrepresentation of eminent domain law. The Fifth Amendment requires that property taken through eminent domain serve a public use. Private development, regardless of claimed economic benefits, does not qualify." The precedents cited by opposing counsel refer to projects involving genuine public infrastructure, roads, utilities, public buildings. A private golf course and luxury condominiums serve no public purpose. They serve the financial interests of Horizon Properties and the Meadowbrook Estates, HOA. Douglas Pemberton objected. "Your Honor, the economic development and job creation constitute public benefit." "If that were true," Tom countered, "then any private business could claim eminent domain rights. Every shopping mall, every housing development, every private enterprise creates jobs and economic activity. The law requires more than that. It requires actual public use and public ownership. The petitioners have failed to meet that burden. Judge Mitchell listened impassively. Does the state wish to present argument? A lawyer from the Attorney General's office stood. Yes, Your Honor. The state of Texas opposes this eminent domain petition. Our office has opened an investigation into the circumstances surrounding this filing, including potential ethics violations by public officials. We believe this petition represents an abuse of the legal process and urges the court to dismiss. Patricia's face had gone pale. The mention of a state investigation clearly caught her off guard. Judge Mitchell tapped her pen against the bench. I've reviewed the submissions from all parties, including the state's amicus brief. I'm troubled by several aspects of this case. The expedited timeline, the questionable public benefit claims, and the involvement of state investigators all raise concerns. However, I'm not prepared to rule today. I'm continuing this matter for 30 days to allow for further briefing and investigation. In the meantime, the preliminary access order is vacated. The HOA is prohibited from entering Mr. Yarborough's property. This hearing is adjourned. Tom and I exchanged glances. It wasn't a victory, but it wasn't a loss either. Patricia looked furious as she conferred urgently with her lawyers. Outside the courthouse, reporters were waiting. They'd gotten word of the state investigation and wanted comments. Tom advised me to say nothing, but I stopped anyway. I just want to keep the land my family has owned for 5 generations, I said. This isn't about money or development, it's about home. That soundbite made the evening news. Over the next week, the story exploded. Local news became state news, became national news. Suddenly, everyone was talking about HOA, overreach, and property rights. Patricia Henderson's face was all over the internet, and not in a flattering way. Reporters dug into Horizon Properties and found a trail of questionable land deals, shell companies, and political donations. The pressure worked. 10 days after the hearing, Tom called me with news. Vincent, they're dropping the eminent domain petition. I sat down hard on my porch steps. They're what? Meadowbrook Estates HOA has formally withdrawn their petition. Patricia Henderson issued a statement claiming it was based on procedural concerns and they intend to pursue alternative development strategies. Translation: they know they've lost and they're trying to save face. So it's over? The eminent domain threat is over, but the Attorney General's investigation is just getting started. They've found evidence of bribery involving 2 county commissioners and Judge Mitchell. There's going to be arrests, probably within the next few days. Sure enough, 72 hours later, I watched the news as County Commissioners Robert Daniels and Susan Crowley were led out of their offices in handcuffs. They'd accepted substantial payments from Horizon Properties in exchange for supporting fraudulent eminent domain claims. Judge Mitchell resigned before she could be formally charged, though the Attorney General indicated they were still building a case against her. Patricia Henderson was arrested a week after that. The charges included fraud, conspiracy to commit bribery, and abuse of legal process. Her mugshot showed a very different woman from the confident HOA president who'd stood on my porch threatening me. She looked exhausted and defeated. The scandal rocked Meadowbrook Estates. Several board members resigned. The HOA retained new legal counsel and issued a formal apology to me and the other landowners they'd targeted. They restructured their bylaws and submitted to state oversight. Governor Richards called me personally. Vincent, I wanted you to hear this from me directly. The investigation has uncovered 15 other cases similar to yours across Texas. We're reaching out to all those property owners and offering state support to help them recover any losses. You standing up to these people helped expose a systematic pattern of corruption. You should be proud. I just wanted to keep my ranch, sir. And you did. But you did more than that. You helped protect a lot of other people too. The civil lawsuits took longer. Tom filed suit against Patricia Henderson, Horizon Properties, and the Meadowbrook Estates HOA for harassment, abusive process, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The case settled 6 months later for an undisclosed amount enough to cover all my legal fees, and then some. Tom insisted on donating a portion to a property rights advocacy group. Patricia Henderson eventually pleaded guilty to reduced charges and served 8 months in federal prison. The county commissioners got longer sentences. Judge Mitchell lost her law license. Horizon Properties declared bankruptcy, its business model exposed and destroyed. Through it all, my ranch remained exactly as it had been, 600 acres of Texas hill country, cattle grazing in the fields, horses in the barn, the old homestead standing proud. I spent a lot of time that year thinking about what had almost happened, how close I'd come to losing everything. One evening, about a year after that first confrontation, I was sitting on my porch watching the sunset when Jake Morrison drove up. He'd been appointed to a federal position in Washington, but he was back in Texas visiting family. "Thought I'd stop by and see how you're doing," Jake said, settling into the chair next to me. "Still here," I said. "Still ranching. You became pretty famous, you know. Property rights activists cite your case all the time. Governor Richards included your story in his State of the State address." "I didn't want to be famous. I just wanted to be left alone." Jake laughed. "Yeah, but you weren't left alone. And because you fought back, a lot of other people are being left alone now. Texas passed new legislation limiting HOA powers and strengthening protections against eminent domain abuse. That's your legacy." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sky turn from gold to purple to deep blue. "You ever think about what you would have done if the governor hadn't helped?" Jake asked. "Every day," I admitted. "I'd like to think I would have fought anyway, found another way. But honestly, I don't know if I could have won without that support. It makes you realize how vulnerable we all are to people with power and bad intentions." "That's why good people have to stand up," Jake said, "even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." After Jake left, I walked out into my fields. The grass was tall and sweet, moving like waves in the evening breeze. Somewhere in the distance, cattle were lowing, settling in for the night. The old oak tree my great-great-grandfather had planted still stood near the original homestead, its branches spreading wide. This land had survived drought, depression, wars, and generations of hard work. It had survived because people fought for it, protected it, loved it. And now it had survived one more threat, maybe the strangest one of all. I thought about Patricia Henderson sometimes, wondering what had driven her to such extremes. Greed, probably, but also something else, a belief that she could take whatever she wanted if she just had enough lawyers and connections. She'd been wrong, but she'd come terrifyingly close to being right. The legal aftermath continued for years in smaller ways. Other landowners who'd been targeted by similar schemes came forward. Some got their property back. Some received compensation. The reforms that passed in Texas inspired similar legislation in other states. Property rights organizations used my case as a teaching tool, showing people how to fight back against abuse. I never got used to being a public figure. Reporters would still call occasionally, wanting updates or comments on new cases. I mostly declined. My lawyer Tom handled the media inquiries, and I focused on what mattered, taking care of my land, my animals, and the legacy my ancestors had built. 2 years after the whole ordeal began, I was selected to testify before a state legislative committee considering new HOA regulations. I drove back to Austin, back to the Capitol building that had seemed so intimidating before. The committee chairman, Representative Marcus Holloway, greeted me warmly. "Mr. Yarborough, thank you for being here. Your experience has been instrumental in shaping this legislation. We'd like you to share your story with the committee." I sat at the witness table, a microphone in front of me, legislators arrayed in a semicircle. I told them about that morning when Patricia Henderson had first appeared at my ranch, about the threats and the court orders and the fear of losing everything. I told them about the governor's intervention, the investigation, the arrests, and I told them about what it meant to almost lose land that represented more than a century of family history. "The problem isn't HOAs themselves," I said. "People have the right to form communities and set reasonable rules. The problem is when those organizations are taken over by individuals who see them as tools for personal profit and power. When an HOA can threaten eminent domain, bribe officials, and manipulate the legal system, something has gone fundamentally wrong. Your proposed legislation would add oversight, require transparency, and create real consequences for abuse. I support it completely." The legislation passed 3 months later with strong bipartisan support. Governor Richards signed it into law in a public ceremony, and I was invited to stand beside him. It felt surreal, full circle from that desperate phone call to Jake to standing in the governor's office watching him sign legislation that would protect countless other property owners. "None of this happens without you," Governor Richards said, shaking my hand for the cameras. "You stood up when it would have been easier to give in. That takes courage." "I didn't have much choice, sir. That land is my life." "You always have a choice. You made the right one." Life slowly returned to normal, or as normal as it could be after becoming an accidental activist. I still got occasional letters from people facing similar situations, asking for advice or support. I helped when I could, connecting people with lawyers and advocacy groups, sharing my story as a template for fighting back. The Meadowbrook Estates development continued, but under new management and with a very different ethos. The new HOA board reached out to me, apologizing profusely for what had happened and promising to be good neighbors. They even helped fund repairs to some of the rural roads we shared. It wasn't their fault what Patricia Henderson had done, and I appreciated their efforts to make amends. I started giving talks at property rights conferences, agricultural association meetings, anywhere people were concerned about land protection. I wasn't a natural public speaker, but I learned to tell my story effectively, emphasizing the importance of knowing your rights, documenting everything, and not being afraid to ask for help. One of those talks led to an unexpected friendship. Emily Crawford was an investigative journalist who'd covered the HOA scandal extensively. She'd written a series of articles exposing Horizon Properties' tactics across multiple states, work that had contributed to federal investigations. After one of my talks, she approached me. "Mr. Yarborough, I'm working on a book about property rights battles across America. Your case is a centerpiece, but I'd like to tell it properly. Would you be willing to do an extended interview?" I hesitated. I've mostly tried to move on. "I understand. But your story isn't just about one ranch in Texas. It's about power, corruption, and ordinary people fighting back. It could help a lot of people facing similar situations." We ended up spending several long afternoons on my porch, Emily recording hours of interviews. She was smart and thorough, asking questions that made me think about the experience in new ways. What had scared me most? What had given me strength? What did I wish I'd known from the beginning? Her book, titled The Last Stand: How American Landowners Are Fighting Back Against Corruption, came out 18 months later. My story was indeed a centerpiece, but she'd found dozens of other cases: farmers fighting big agriculture, homeowners battling developers, indigenous tribes protecting sacred sites. It was sobering and inspiring at the same time. The book launch was in Austin, and Emily insisted I attend. I found myself in a bookstore surrounded by activists, lawyers, journalists, and other people who'd fought their own battles. We traded stories, advice, and encouragement. I realized I wasn't alone, that there were countless others fighting to protect what mattered to them. One man, probably in his 70s, approached me with tears in his eyes. "Mr. Yarborough, I lost my family farm to a similar scheme 10 years ago. I didn't know how to fight back, didn't have the resources. Reading about what you did, how you won it, gives me hope that maybe things are changing. I didn't know what to say. I'm sorry about your farm. Don't be sorry, be proud. You helped make sure it won't happen to as many people going forward. That matters." As more years passed, the immediacy of the crisis faded, but the lessons remained. I became more involved in local politics, attending county commissioner meetings and staying informed about land use decisions. I joined agricultural associations and conservation groups. I made sure my voice was heard on issues affecting rural landowners. The ranch itself continued to thrive. I upgraded some of the infrastructure with the settlement money, fixing fences, improving irrigation, and renovating the old barn. I hired a couple of young ranch hands, teaching them the skills my father had taught me. I wanted to make sure this land would continue to be worked properly, whether or not I had children to pass it to. I never married, never had kids. The ranch was my legacy, and I poured everything into it. Some people might think that's sad, but I never felt that way. This land, this work, this connection to history and nature, it was enough. 5 years after the whole ordeal began, I received an unexpected letter. It was from Patricia Henderson, postmarked from a small town in Oklahoma. I almost threw it away without reading, but curiosity won out. "Mr. Yarborough," it read in neat handwriting. "I don't expect you to forgive me, and I'm not asking you to. I'm writing because I owe you an honest accounting of what I did and why. I convinced myself that development and progress justified any means necessary. I told myself that your attachment to your ranch was sentimental, and that the greater good required you to sacrifice. I was wrong about all of it. I destroyed lives, including my own, because I couldn't see past my own ambition and greed. I served my time, lost everything I thought mattered, and I'm trying to build a different kind of life now. I volunteer at a legal aid clinic, helping people who are being taken advantage of by corporations and institutions. It's my attempt at penance. I don't expect your forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I understand now what I did to you and others. I'm truly sorry. Patricia Henderson." I read the letter 3 times, trying to process my feelings. I felt anger, but also something like pity. She'd thrown away her life chasing things that didn't matter, and she'd figured it out too late. I wrote back a short note. "Patricia, I appreciate your letter and your honesty. I hope you find peace in your new work. The ranch is still here, still in my family. That's all that matters to me. Vincent Yarborough." I never heard from her again, but I hoped she was genuine about changing. People were capable of growth, even after terrible mistakes. The 10th anniversary of that first confrontation came and went quietly. I marked it by standing at my property line, looking out over 600 acres of Texas hill country that had almost been stolen from me. The grass was green from recent rain, the cattle were healthy and fat, the old homestead stood proud, weathered but strong. I thought about my ancestors who'd worked this land, about the governor who'd answered my call, about all the people who'd helped me fight. I thought about Patricia Henderson and the county commissioners in prison, about Judge Mitchell who'd lost everything. I thought about the legislation that now protected other landowners, about the people who'd written to thank me for standing up. Most of all, I thought about how fragile freedom really is, how quickly it can be taken if people don't pay attention and fight back. My ranch had survived because I'd been willing to make noise, ask for help, and refuse to give in. Not everyone would be that lucky, but maybe the systems were a little bit better now, a little bit fairer. Governor Richards had retired from politics and was teaching at the University of Texas. We'd stayed in touch, exchanging emails a few times a year. He'd written to me on the anniversary. Vincent, it's been 10 years since you walked into my office and gave us the opportunity to do the right thing. That case shaped my final years as governor and remains one of my proudest accomplishments. You protected your land, but you also helped us protect the rule of law. Thank you for your courage, Bill Richards. Jake Morrison was now a deputy secretary in the Department of the Interior, working on conservation and land management issues nationwide. He'd told me once that my case had influenced his thinking about property rights and the need to balance development with preservation. Tom Richardson had retired from active practice but still consulted on property rights cases. He'd helped train a new generation of lawyers who specialized in protecting landowners from predatory schemes. He stopped by the ranch a few times a year, and we'd sit on the porch drinking coffee and talking about old cases. Emily Crawford's book had spawned a documentary which spawned a movement. Property rights organizations were stronger and better organized than ever. States had tightened regulations on eminent domain and HOA powers. Federal agencies were more aggressive about investigating corruption. The change wasn't perfect or complete, but it was real. I continued to give occasional talks, always emphasizing the same themes. Know your rights, document everything, don't be afraid to ask for help, and never underestimate the power of one person standing up. Young people would approach me afterward, energized and inspired, ready to fight their own battles. It gave me hope. The ranch hands I'd hired grew into skilled managers. I taught them everything: animal husbandry, land management, crop rotation, water conservation. I wanted them to understand that ranching wasn't just a job, it was a responsibility to the land and to history. They got it. One of them, a kid named Marcus who'd grown up in Houston and never seen a cow up close until he was 20, told me once that working on the ranch had changed his life. I didn't know work could mean something beyond a paycheck, Marcus said. Taking care of this place, knowing the history, being part of something bigger, it matters. That's what I'd been trying to preserve all along. Not just acreage or cattle or buildings, but meaning and connection and legacy. Patricia Henderson had wanted to turn it into a golf course, a commodity to be bought and sold and consumed. She'd never understood what she was trying to destroy. I started writing down my family's history, interviewing relatives and digging through old documents. My great-great-grandfather had come to Texas with nothing but determination and built a life from raw land. My great-grandfather had survived the Depression by being smarter and tougher than the circumstances. My grandfather had modernized the ranch, adding new techniques and technologies. My father had focused on sustainability and conservation, making sure the land would remain productive for future generations. And me? I'd protected it from those who would have stolen it. That was my contribution to the family legacy, standing guard when it mattered most. I thought about creating a trust to ensure the ranch would never be developed, even after I was gone. Tom helped me set up a conservation easement, legally protecting the land from subdivision or commercial development in perpetuity. If I ever sold or donated it, those restrictions would remain. The ranch would always be a ranch, no matter who owned it. Local schools started bringing students out for field trips, learning about ranching and agriculture and Texas history. I'd walk them around the property, showing them how cattle are raised, how the land is managed, how everything connects in a working ecosystem. The kids were always surprised that ranching was so complicated, so much more than just letting animals wander around eating grass. My great-great-grandfather built that homestead in 1891, I'd tell them, pointing to the old stone building. Think about that, he built it with his hands, stone by stone. No power tools, no shortcuts, just determination and sweat. And it's still standing, over 130 years later. That's what happens when you do something right. One kid asked me once, "Did you ever think about just selling when they offered you the money?" Every dollar they offered represented a piece of my family's history being erased, I said. How do you put a price on that? How do you explain to your ancestors that you gave up everything they built because someone waved money at you? I couldn't do it. Wouldn't do it. As I moved into my 60s, I started thinking more seriously about succession planning. I didn't have children, but I had cousins and their kids scattered across Texas. Some of them had expressed interest in the ranch. I invited them out, one family at a time, letting them experience the place and understand what it meant. My cousin's daughter, Victoria, fell in love with it immediately. She was in her mid-20s, working a corporate job in Dallas and hating every minute. She spent a weekend at the ranch and didn't want to leave. Uncle Vincent, I know this sounds crazy, but I'd love to learn ranching. Everything about this place feels right to me. It's not an easy life, I warned. Long hours, physical work, economic uncertainty. You won't get rich. I don't care about being rich. I care about doing something real, something meaningful. She started visiting regularly, then moved down and worked alongside me and the ranch hands. She was a natural, hardworking, intuitive with animals, respectful of the land. After a couple of years, I started teaching her the business side, showing her the books and the decision-making processes. This ranch survived because someone fought for it, I told her. If you're going to take over someday, you need to understand that. It's not just property, it's a responsibility. You protect it, preserve it, and pass it on better than you found it. I understand, Victoria said. I won't let you down. I believed her. She had the same fire in her eyes that my father had described seeing in his father. The land called to certain people, and Victoria had heard the call. We made it official with legal documents. Victoria would inherit the ranch when I passed, along with the conservation easement and the responsibility that came with it. She quit her Dallas job and moved to the ranch full-time, buying a small trailer to live in while we built her a proper house on the far edge of the property. Watching her work the land, seeing her develop relationships with the animals and the rhythms of ranch life, I felt something I hadn't expected: peace. The ranch would continue. The legacy would survive. Everything I'd fought for had meaning beyond my own lifetime. News articles still got written occasionally, usually when someone faced a similar HOA battle and reporters wanted historical context. Remember the Yarborough case in Texas? They'd write. Here's how one rancher fought eminent domain abuse and won. I'd usually decline interviews, but sometimes I'd talk if I thought it would help someone in a similar situation. The Meadowbrook Estates HOA had long since reformed into a functional, ethical organization. The new residents were good neighbors, respecting property boundaries and rural culture. Some of them even bought cattle from me. The scandal was an embarrassing footnote in their community history, something they'd moved past. I ran into one of the new HOA board members at a county meeting once. She approached me nervously. "Mr. Yarborough, I just wanted to say again how sorry we are for what happened. What Patricia Henderson did was unconscionable. I hope you know we're nothing like that now." "I know," I said. "You're not responsible for what she did. You've been good neighbors." She looked relieved. "We try. Some of us have actually been pushing to rename the HOA, start completely fresh. The Meadowbrook name is kind of tainted by association." "That's your decision to make. I've got no opinion on it." In the end, they did rename it Hill Country Estates, a fresh start with new bylaws and aggressive transparency requirements. I approved. On quiet evenings, which were most evenings, I'd sit on my porch and think about the chain of events that had led me here. If Jake Morrison hadn't been the governor's chief of staff, if Governor Richards hadn't taken an interest, if the Attorney General hadn't been building a case against Horizon Properties, any of those factors missing, and I might have lost everything. But I'd also fought back. I'd made noise, stood my ground, and refused to be bullied. Luck had played a role, but so had courage and determination. That was the message I tried to share when I spoke to groups facing their own battles. You need both luck and courage, and you create your own luck by being willing to fight. The land itself remained the constant through everything: the rolling hills, the oak trees, the creeks that ran full after rain and trickled during drought. The land didn't care about HOAs or eminent domain or legal battles. It just was, enduring and patient, waiting for people to remember their proper relationship with it. I taught Victoria everything I knew about that relationship. How to read the grass to know when to move cattle, how to manage drought and flood, how to balance production with conservation, how to respect the history while planning for the future. She absorbed it all, asking smart questions and developing her own instincts. "You're a natural," I told her one day as we were mending fence line together. "I love it here," she said simply. "I can't imagine doing anything else." That was the key: loving the land for itself, not for what it could become or what it could be sold for. Patricia Henderson had seen 600 acres of opportunity for profit. Victoria saw 600 acres of home and responsibility. One perspective led to corruption and prison. The other led to meaning and continuation. As I approached my 70s, I gradually transitioned more responsibility to Victoria. She took over day-to-day operations while I focused on long-term planning and enjoying the ranch I'd fought so hard to keep. I spent more time on the porch, watching sunrises and sunsets, listening to the sounds of cattle and wind and life. Tom Richardson passed away quietly at 82, surrounded by family. I spoke at his funeral about how he'd stood beside me during the darkest time, how he'd never doubted we could win, how he'd devoted his career to protecting people like me. His son, also a lawyer, promised to continue his father's work. Governor Richards wrote a memoir that dedicated an entire chapter to the Yarborough case, calling it a turning point in his understanding of power and corruption. He sent me a signed copy with a note, "You made me a better governor. Thank you, Bill." Jake Morrison visited when he could, usually once a year. We'd spend an evening catching up, talking about politics and land management and life. He'd gone gray, but still had that sharp energy that had made him successful. "You ever regret any of it?" Jake asked during one visit. "The public attention, the legal battles, all of it?" "Not for a second," I said. "I saved my family's ranch. Everything else was just the cost of doing that." "You did more than save your ranch. You changed the system." "Maybe a little, but systems have a way of slipping back if people don't stay vigilant. The same battles will have to be fought again, just with different faces and different tactics." "Then we fight them again," Jake said. "That's the deal when you live in a free society. Freedom requires eternal vigilance, right?" Something like that. The years continued to pass, each one blending into the next in the comfortable rhythm of ranch life. Calves were born, cattle were sold, fences needed mending, equipment broke down and was repaired. Victoria married a veterinarian named Samuel, and they built their life together on the ranch. They had a daughter, Grace, who took her first steps in the same fields where I'd played as a child and my father had played before me. Watching Grace grow up on the ranch gave me a satisfaction I'd never expected. The legacy was secure, not just for one more generation, but for many beyond. The land would endure. The history would continue. Sometimes I'd tell Grace stories about her great-great-great-great-great-grandfather who'd built the original homestead, about the family who'd survived the Depression, about the time a mean lady tried to take our ranch away, and how we fought back. She'd listen with wide eyes, not fully understanding but sensing the importance. "Did you beat the mean lady, Grandpa Vince?" she'd ask. "We did, because we were brave and because good people helped us, and that's why you get to play here now." That was the simplest, truest version of the story. Everything else, the legal complexities, the political maneuvering, the investigations and arrests, was just details. The core truth was that bad people had tried to take something that didn't belong to them, and good people had stopped them. On my 75th birthday, Victoria and Samuel threw me a party at the ranch. Neighbors came, old friends, people from agricultural associations and property rights groups. Jake Morrison flew in from Washington. Emily Crawford came from wherever she was living now, still writing and investigating. Even some of the reformed Meadowbrook Hill Country Estates board members showed up with a nice gift basket. We ate barbecue under the oak trees and told stories and watched the sun set over land that had been in my family for more than 135 years. Grace ran around with other kids, playing games that kids have probably played on this land for generations. Jake found me as things were winding down. "Hell of a party, Vince. Hell of a life." "It's been something," I agreed. "You know what the best part is? You won, completely and totally. Patricia Henderson went to prison. The corrupt officials lost everything. The laws got changed. And you're still here, on your land, surrounded by family and friends. That's as close to a perfect ending as life gets." "It's not an ending," I said. "Victoria and Samuel will run this place after I'm gone. Grace will grow up here. Maybe she'll want a ranch, maybe not, but the land will still be here. That's what matters, continuity." Jake raised his beer bottle. "To continuity, then, and to stubborn ranchers who won't give up." We clinked bottles and drank, watching the last light fade from the sky. I lived to see the 20th anniversary of that morning when Patricia Henderson had first appeared on my porch. It was celebrated with a small article in the Texas Monthly magazine, reflecting on how the case had changed HOA regulations and property rights law. The reporter interviewed me by phone, asking if I ever thought about what might have happened if things had gone differently. "Every day," I told her honestly, "but they didn't go differently. The ranch is still here, still producing, still home. That's what I focus on." The ranch continued to thrive under Victoria's management. She had implemented new sustainable practices, diversified into some specialty crops, and even started offering educational tours for agriculture students. The place was more productive and more respected than it had been in decades. I spent my final years as I'd spent so many years before on my porch, watching the land I'd fought to protect. I watched storms roll across the hills, watched cattle move through the pastures, watched the seasons change. I watched Grace grow from a toddler to a bright young girl who loved the ranch as much as any Yarborough ever had. When people asked me what I was most proud of, I always gave the same answer. I protected what mattered. That's enough. The fight against Patricia Henderson and the Meadowbrook HOA had been the defining challenge of my life. But it hadn't been my whole life. My whole life was the land, the work, the connection to history and future. The fight had just been what I'd had to do to preserve all of that. In the end, sitting on my porch, watching another Texas sunrise paint the hills gold, I felt nothing but gratitude. Gratitude for ancestors who'd built something worth protecting. Gratitude for friends and officials who'd helped me fight. Gratitude for Victoria and Samuel and Grace who would carry it forward. And gratitude for the land itself, patient and enduring, the only thing that really mattered. The ranch stood as it had for over 135 years, would stand for hundreds more if Victoria and her descendants protected it as fiercely as I had. That was legacy. That was victory. That was home. And somewhere, I like to imagine, my father and grandfather and great-grandfather were satisfied. They'd built something that lasted. They'd passed it on. And when it was threatened, I'd defended it with everything I had. The chain remained unbroken. The land endured. The story continued. That was enough. That was everything.